Good morning. I'm out at the Overlook over Keystone Dam. I've got a different book to read today. Not sure how far we'll get because there's quite a bit of traffic up here. But today's book is Water Bears No Scars by David K. Reynolds, PhD. This book is dedicated to Dr. and Mrs. Mamoru Iga mentors, patrons, and friends. The preface. We live in an era of leisure. Technologically advanced countries allow a freedom from life-threatening insecurity never before found in the history of humankind. Without the purpose of the struggle for everyday survival, we find increasing numbers of people drifting into lethargy, drugs, and suicide. It isn't necessary to work as hard, or sometimes even to work at all to survive. The psychological effects of this lack of meaningful activity are disturbing. There has come a slow shift from doing things worthwhile to just filling time. Those who are just putting in the hours of their lives are nearly dead already. The essays in this book are about a lifeway that can underlie and make meaningful both work and leisure activities. This lifeway focuses on the quality with which an act, even a simple act, like washing dishes or dialing a telephone, is carried out. It turns every moment's behavior into an exercise in character development and growth. We need not wait for big events and others' decisions to determine who we are. The opportunity to become who we want to become lies in this very moment's behavior. Conditions of modern life leave us much time to do as we please, and as much or as little as we please. The gut level meaning involved in the hunt, or the gathering of crops, or the creation of hand tools, or the learning of survival techniques, has been replaced by dependence on specialists, professionals who grow and process our food, create our clothing and houses for us, teach us remote and impractical information in our schools, if there is to be meaning in shopping, baseball, movies, and adult education, then it must be found on a level different from the face-to-face encounter with survival. The lifeway that I have been writing about creates meaning on another level, a level that has nothing to do with the intrinsic value of any particular activity. The focus on the quality of action applies as well to tying one's shoelaces as to performing surgery. Therein lies its value. One need not be chairing the board of a large corporation or running a branch of the government or performing before thousands of fans. One need not even be able to leave one's hospital room or one's bed, or be able to see or hear in order to find purpose and meaning in everyday life. This volume is the third in a series on the use of Eastern lifeways and personal growth methods in the West. In Playing Ball on Running Water and elsewhere in Constructive Living, I began to outline the ways in which Mauritius and Nikan ideas from Japan could be of concrete, practical use in a program of self-development. Even in summer, the ice doesn't melt. These ideas and exercises were extended and deepened. Now, in this book, The Water Bears No Scars, new stories, illustrations, and exercises will build the students' understanding and practice yet further. The water theme flows through all the titles in this series. Water has the quality of non-resistance to its containers, its boundaries, yet it constantly pushes toward its goal. Its patience and persistence are examples for us. And when the circumstances are ripe, water rushes towards its destination in rapids and waterfalls. The situational appropriateness of the flow of water is well considered in Eastern literature. The water images from Buddhist and Taoist koans and verse were adapted for these book titles. Acknowledgements, page 11. People on both sides of the Pacific helped me learn and develop this constructive living method. The director of Sekatsu no Hakinkai, Yozo Hasagawa, taught me by his words and his actions about his life way. Dr. Hiromu Shimbo and his family showed me unflagging courtesy and hospitality during my annual stays in Japan. The staff members of the Hakinkai office and the board of directors gave concrete support and encouragement. The Tamasharos and Agawas on the respective islands of Kauai and Maui provided living models of constructive lifestyles, allowing me to live with them as I learned and wrote. My wife, Lynn, exhibits her wonderful steadiness and patience through my isolated periods of writing and travel. She keeps on teaching me dependability and responsibility. At Morrow, Douglas Stumpf and his assistant, Barry Schwabsky, provide just the right balance of distance for independent freedom and closeness for supportive encouragement. Somehow, books get written. Looking back, I sometimes wonder how and who, but never why. Page 15. The shadow of the bamboo sweeps the steps, but the dust does not stir. The moon's disk bores into the lake, but the water shows no scars. From the Taoist Saigon Den. Part 1. The essays. Weeds. Perspective. This morning, I have been weeding a wonderfully instructive garden on the island of Kauai. It is the size of a house lot and contains a wide variety of vegetables and fruits and flowers. I spend many hours each year working in this garden. It has taught me quite a few lessons that extend beyond its tea leaf boundaries. Today, as I weeded, among the cabbage, lettuce, chrysanthemums, I was struck by the necessity of looking for the little green interlopers from many different angles. After it appeared that I had cleared a bed of weeds, I could walk back around it and find a number that had been missed, some as big as my hand. Another circuit of the patch at a different angle, with a few leaves pulled out of the way, I could find still more weeds to be cleared. It is very unlikely that the latter had sprung up suddenly in the few minutes since the last round of weeding. They were there all along, unseen. The different angle of the sun and the shift of the wind helped me make them visible. It was the combination of the changing circumstances and my changing perspective that brought them to light. I'm glad that I took the time to go over the same ground a couple of extra times. There was something to learn from doing so. Probably there are still a few weeds hiding among my leafy friends. That's all right. I have to decide when there is something more important to do than going over those beds again. The weeds I missed will grow larger and more visible with time. Someday I'll catch them and leave some others. The line between thoroughness and unconstructive perfectionism is one we may draw and cross every day. The garden reminds me of that line. It reminds me, too, of what psychotherapy ought to be about in contrast to what it has all too often become. There comes a time when it is no longer useful to go over the same ground again. It is time to be planting new beds. Persistence. Weeding doesn't show results in the same way that planting does. After we have weeded for a few hours, the result is the absence of something. The effect of weeding is to return the garden or lawn to its proper previous condition. Planting and harvesting give us something added for our effort. We see green shoots appearing. We have baskets of fruits and vegetables and flowers for our work. Weeding is thankless, but necessary. It takes diligence and an eye for the value of subtraction to persevere at weeding. The principles of weeding are valuable for all of us, but I especially like to see teachers and students, parents and children, and similar pairs of role groups weeding together. Here is a modern koan for your consideration. A friend came over to offer Miss Tama help weeding her lawn and garden. The friend appreciated the gifts of fruit from the garden that Miss Tama kindly delivered from time to time. Miss Tama could use the help, so she gladly accepted his offer. Day after day, the friend put in an hour or two pulling weeds. Unfortunately, there was one variety of clover to which the friend seemed attached. He refused to pull out that clover. Miss Tama noticed that the clover remained in the lawn and garden. She pointed out that she considered the clover to be a weed. Nevertheless, the friend continued to let that weed grow while he carefully worked on the other varieties. The problem for your consideration here is, what should Miss Tama do? There are plenty of possibilities for response or a non-response. Each one tells us something about Miss Tama and about you. There is only one correct response to this situation in the real world. Miss Tama found it. Can you? Wisdom. Cleverness isn't the same as wisdom. Wisdom comes with life experience, alertness, and intelligence. Cleverness can be taught, even in classes, even to young people. I think it is not surprising that much of therapy is practiced in the West today is little more than clever conversation. Young people haven't the accumulation of struggles, successes, and failures to advise their clients about living, no matter what degree they have accumulated. Let me begin with an example of common sense advice based on the moral wisdom of Morita therapy. Greet the people you work with and live near when you first encounter them each day. This advice is commonly given to people with difficulties in the social sphere, such as shyness. A recent issue of Hakenkishi magazine contained this suggestion. The suggestion is quite simple and straightforward. Whether the person feels isolated or tense or left out or shy or frightened, he is to do the greeting. You may consider that the greeting is merely a behavioral assignment, but it is more than that. It has a moral component. What the greeting advice is not psychological uncovering by verbal means. By making this assignment, we aren't aiming at producing some insight in a psychoanalytic sense. We aren't using words to discover unconscious tendencies. We are dealing with something quite different from Western verbal encounter therapies. The assignment to greet one's neighbors is built on the recognition that neurosis grows as much from social moral errors as from wrong understandings and unpleasant feelings. That is, psychological difficulties. The shy person has been neglecting social responsibilities. He has been avoiding simple social courtesies. When he does what is, quote, proper, the social relations are more likely to be smooth, and the client is more likely to feel good about them. In the past, when he ignored and avoided people, he felt uncomfortable about them and about himself. The performance of the greeting puts him back on the social track. Whatever the response of others, they may return his greeting or they may snub him. He has done his social part and has successfully carried out his assignment as requested. He feels an uneasy, He feels an increased sense of control over the situation. To put it baldly, greetings are quote-unquote good, quote-unquote right, quote-unquote proper moral behaviors. Morita therapists don't assign just any behaviors when working with clients. They never assign behaviors when working. They never assign behaviors that are considered wrong or immoral by society. When they are in doubt about the rightness of a behavior, they leave the choice up to the client or else advise against the behavior. So you see that any uncrossing of psychological wiring comes as a result of correcting the behavior. And the word correcting carries clear moral overtones. Part of the appeal of Morita therapy to Westerners is that it includes this aspect of moral wisdom. Western therapy has become obsessed with technique. That obsession is partly because Western educators want to train therapists in university settings. We want to teach people intellectually how to guide people out of neurosis. I think it is difficult to teach effective psychotherapy in the classroom to young people with little life experience. There is nothing wrong with using common sense and wisdom in the therapy setting. So many neurotic difficulties can be solved by straightening out sloppy and thoughtless acts. Morals may not be the same from society to society or from individual to individual, but we cannot neglect the moral side of behavior and avoid psychological consequences.